If you love cars or hate them, if you drive a lot or just jump out of their way, then you'll be interested in these two cars. They represent a clash of the automotive giants with huge stakes. They're after your dollar, and whether they succeed or not will affect the livelihood of tens of thousands of people. The new Mitsubishi Sigma is the latest version of a Japanese design but Australian manufactured model that has become the top-selling four-cylinder car in this country. It leads a segment of the market that now accounts for nearly 30% of all vehicle sales. To stay on top is of vital importance to Mitsubishi, its employees, its component suppliers, and its dealers. The greatest challenge the Sigma has yet faced comes from the Holden Camira. This is the GMH version of the long-awaited world car. Manufactured locally, it is basically a European design but heavily modified to suit Australian conditions. So just how good is the Camira? And more important, how does it compare with the Sigma, the car it must topple? And can the Sigma, the champion of such long standing, withstand the challenge? Well, even the most avid viewer of television would have difficulty in learning much about the cars from watching the commercials. The Sigma is shown breaking panes of glass, and the Camira rises through the floor as though intruding upon the set of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Well, we're proposing a different sort of encounter. We're going to take these two cars on the toughest test that we could devise. We're going to drive them across Australia on virtually every type of road that you might reasonably be expected to drive upon. If things go wrong, we'll show you. We'll tell you what car does what things better than the other. And at the end of the test, we'll pick a winner. This is the test course. As you can see, it includes a crossing of Australia from north to south. The cars, in fact, started their journey in Brisbane, but the full team of testers met up at the central Queensland town of Clermont. We're joining in a comparison test run by the magazine Wheels, whose editor, Peter Robinson, regularly runs tests between the most important cars in Australia, and he and his assistant editor, Bob Murray, an Englishman who's been in the country about 2 years, carry out tests of cars that they think are of particular interest to Australian buyers to see which is best. Noel Tuckey, a mechanic and well known to the party, joined in, travelling in this Mercedes-Benz diesel-powered station wagon, to lend a mechanical hand if it was needed, and to carry all the photographic gear, including that of staff Wheels photographer Warwick Kent. Phil Scott, the motoring correspondent of Sydney's Sun Herald, joined the party, and in all there were 7 of us to do the journey and to add our comments and our opinions.
Yes.
You haven't got any Kleenex out at the moment? No, okay, I'll put a pack in each car then.
Right. You've got one of those large fluorescent torch things too. Right.
Packing the cars so that the weight was fairly evenly distributed took about an hour, and then the journey proper began. We were heading to the north, towards the Gulf of Carpentaria. A comparison between the Sigma and Camira is more than just a story of Mitsubishi versus Holden. It's a confrontation between older or orthodox design and the more modern and less conventional, between, if you like, yesterday's type of car, the sort most of us will be driving in the future. The Sigma is built the way that Holdens and Falcons and most of the cars that Australians have been driving over the years used to be made, with the engine at the front and the drive through the rear wheels. The Camira, by comparison, is a front-wheel drive model. It's lighter. It's built to offer more space than conventional designs. But there is some doubt in people's minds about whether front-wheel drive is as suited to local conditions as the tried and trusted formula which is exemplified by the Sigma. We changed cars regularly, so each of us drove both models over the same sort of road conditions. And soon we had our first example of the roughness of Australia's inland highways. Tourists from a broken-down coach were searching for a part that had fallen from their bus.
Yeah, we're looking for gold.
Looking for gold?
No, we've lost a bolt and a nut off the airlines from the coach set. We had to walk back 300 or 400 yards. We found a nut. We were looking for a bolt.
It's as rough as that, eh?
Yeah. Oh, it's pretty rough, yeah, but we've been under rougher country though.
Right.
Yeah. Could have been working this for a while,
yeah.
You know?
What happens if you don't find it?
Well, we don't know yet. We'll be
We'll be camping here.
We better get on then.
No, thanks for stopping.
Okay, fine.
Bye.
We're having fun.
Well, they're not concerned, are they?
Hey, pay for the trip and form the search party while the bus driver stays back in the shade. The second morning of our journey, and about as far north as we're going to go. This is Normanton on the Gulf of Carpentaria. The cars have travelled more than 2,100 kilometres from the start of Brisbane, and since we met up at Claremont yesterday, we travelled something like 1,200 kilometres in just on 13 hours. So it's a good time, having had 4 hours sleep, to get together and to just compare notes after that first long session in the car.
Yes, early days, mate. Not about.
Any really noticeable difference as far as front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive is concerned?
Oh, sure, yeah. So the front-wheel drive car on the sandy stuff tends to pull just a touch. It's not
A bit more nervous.
A bit more nervous, sure.
I think that on some conditions that you get the back of the Sigma dancing around a little bit, but it's really nothing to worry about. And this one, you are aware that it's front-wheel drive car.
I think the thing we've got to bear in mind is we're talking about two very good cars. It'd be nice to have something that wasn't quite so good.
Well, yes, that's right. We should have bought the worst car in the class and then we'd know all about it. They're both very good.
The Camira has a 1.6-litre four-cylinder engine, while the Sigma was using the 2-litre 4. But we soon established that performance levels in terms of cruising and acceleration were the same for both cars. The Sigma, by the way, had developed a leak in the gearbox. It was pumping oil up through the speedo cable, but it certainly didn't have any effect on the car's performance. Our route took us along the southern rim of the Gulf of Carpentaria and through typical outback conditions and delays. "125 years ago, Augustus Charles Gregory came to this place, the Bino River, on his journey across northern Australia. One of his missions was to search for signs of Ludwig Leichhardt, who'd been missing for 12 years, which in hindsight seems a little late to be searching for someone. But still, Gregory began in Western Australia on the Victoria River. He had a boat, which he put in charge of the expedition artist, a man called Baines. The idea was that Gregory and his party would ride on horseback to the Gulf while Baines would sail around the coast. They agreed to meet here on the Bino, but the boat ran aground in the Victoria River and had to sail to Jakarta for repairs. So Baines goes to Jakarta. They spend 8 months rebuilding the ship there, and then he sails with the captain into the Gulf of Carpentaria, finds the Bino River and goes down. Well, the expedition on horseback with Gregory had got there without any trouble at all, because Gregory was a master bushman. They went to a tree at the precise point that he'd indicated, left a message in the tree and rode off. Baines comes down, finds the precise tree, sees a letter, says, "I'm okay, I'll meet you in Sydney," and it sails around and meets in Sydney. You couldn't find the precise tree today if you had the road map, but they did it in those days. Amazing navigation.
Wheels magazine invented car comparisons. When General Motors released its new front-wheel drive Camira, we decided we had to compare it against the Sigma, which has been for a long time the top-selling 2-litre car in Australia. So we devised this comparison test over 8,500 kilometres through 5 Australian states, encompassing a wide variety of conditions from bull dust to snow to flat plains, city running. Up till date, we haven't really had very many problems with the cars. The Sigma's had a problem with the gearbox, and the Camira has had a little bit of water get into the boot and into some taillights, but apart from that, things have been going very well.
By the third day, we were well south of the Gulf refuelling at the remote Western Queensland settlement of Boulia. A few of the party had been visiting the shops, buying hats. All they lacked was a little of the local dust, which could soon be fixed.
Tough, mate. Still tough for a big country, you know. Experienced. There we are, sir.
We had intended looping into the Northern Territory, but severe dust forced a detour due south straight to the town of Birdsville.
Birdsville, in most people's mind, is the back of beyond. That's the sort of reputation this Queensland outpost has. But it's a town with a sense of humour. Let me show you what I mean. Over here in a corner of the airfield, with the police station in the background and the Simpson Desert just beyond that sandhill, there are 2 monuments to the first people to cross the Simpson Desert. This was put up by the Royal Geographical Society to honour the first man to cross the Simpson Desert. Well, that incensed the locals, because a fellow called Ted Colson had done it 3 years before him. He was a local, and this is a memorial they put up alongside the official one, just to show that one of their blokes had done it first.
Well, you're a big bloke, you're interested in cars. Do you want to have a sit behind the wheel of the new Camira? You know what it's like?
Craig Hargens is a travelling salesman. We found him in Birdsville.
That's all right. Bloody good.
And as you can see, he's well equipped to judge a car on the question of spaciousness and comfort.
There I go. Ooh.
He preferred the Camira because he found it had more head and stomach room.
There used to be 3 pubs in Birdsville around the turn of the century. This one, the Old Royal, which hasn't been in use for a long time, and the one remaining one, which is down the road where we started. Many of them were built from adobe, from a mixture of mud and straw. And in times of drought, the camels used to come roaming in from the Simpson Desert and eat the straw, with the result that the camels destroyed at least 2.5 of the pubs in Birdsville.
The Birdsville Track is as remote as ever, although it isn't as rough as it used to be. Just off the track, however, are plenty of sand hills, which gave us the chance to test the cars for traction in sand, something few conventional cars can handle, particularly a climb like this. The Sigma had a little bit of axle tramp in the sand, but did remarkably well. The Camira's sump guard had been clouted by a rock, and that rattle you can hear is the guard hitting the exhaust pipe. Straight up, straight down. Both cars did amazingly well. We'd call that a draw.
The early stages of the Birdsville Track up here in the north take you across Sturt's Stony Desert, an incredible region of polished ironstones. The explorer Charles Sturt walked and rode a horse across this region in 1845. He called it the cobblestones of hell. He was trying to find his way to the inland of Australia. He kept on towards the horizon, and out there Charles Sturt went blind.
See whether we can get tyres. I think too that we'll probably go through the...
The hazards facing travellers these days may be less extreme, but there are problems. Stones were causing the Mercedes some distress, puncturing its tyres and putting holes in the fuel tank. Leaks we fixed with the bushman's bandage of soap mixed with strands of rope.
It's a lovely car, there's no doubt. But how does
Noel Tuckey could see his mount running out of tyres and fuel on the Birdsville Track and stranding him in literally the back of beyond, which is probably why he was looking so worried.
Hole in the fuel tank.
The wagon had been heavily laden, of course, and usually travelled at the rear of the convoy in the worst dust, but it did give the most comfortable ride.
I think it proves that you can't just take a European car and expect it to cope with the worst conditions which Australia can provide. They're wonderful cars in the city and on the bitumen, but when you get them out here in conditions which Europe simply doesn't have, then they're not really suitable. The locals don't drive them.
The inland roads pound and shake a vehicle, and if there's any weakness, something will break. There aren't many signs on the Birdsville Track, but this fella has managed to run off the road and hit one. His four-wheel drive, carrying Dave on a lonely journey solo right around Australia, has broken his steering, took him off the track and collected the signpost. The nearest garage is at least 600 kilometres away, and breakdowns can be both costly and nerve-wracking in this part of the world.
Radio through.
How am I going to get one of these? Well, it's going to take days anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, if I leave my vehicle out here, by the time I come back, there'll be nothing left.
So we put Dave in one of the cars and then drove him towards the nearest homestead, the cattle station, Clifton Hills. It lies right on the junction of the Stony Desert and the Simpson Desert. It's a cattle station, and it's the third largest property in all of Australia, sprawling across more than 27,000 square kilometres of desert. Clifton Hills is a self-contained community with a workshop to repair almost anything. And using their welder, Noel fixed Dave's broken steering rod.
Thanks a lot.
Well, he's still grinning, and thus we left Dave to hitch a ride back to his four-wheel drive whenever the next vehicle came, heading north. When I first drove the Birdsville Track, that was once every fortnight. These days, you're likely to strike vehicles more often. It took us 4 hours, though, to meet someone coming the other way. The driver of this big road train pulled up, and he did promise to stop, collect Dave, and take him the 40 kilometres back to his crippled four-wheel drive. This is cattle country, and the Birdsville Track is a cattle track, put through last century to bring cattle fattening in the fine grazing lands in southwestern Queensland down to the markets of South Australia. But there's no permanent surface water here, so the cattle had to find some way to survive, or the people who drove them down did. And they drilled a series of bores down to reach the Artesian Basin. And one day's walk apart, these bores now lie along the Birdsville Track. Because the water comes from around 1,000 metres below the surface, as you can see, it comes out almost boiling hot. So drains have been dug down to the lower levels where the cattle, maybe 500-600 metres away, drink the cooled bore water. Cars on a comparison test suffer a bit because if you strike really rough conditions, you go back and do it again. Not only to take pictures, but to see how each car copes, to see how it tracks through the loose, like this patch of bull dust. In other words, whether the cars wander or plunge around. And afterwards, we spend time examining the cars for any signs of dust having intruded, and of course, we make a thorough examination for any signs of damage. The morning of day 6. Parachilna is on the western boundary of the Flinders Ranges. This morning is to be devoted to photography, so we have to look our best. And while Noel stays at the pub to fix the fuel tank on the wagon, the rest of us decide to head for the Parachilna Gorge. Wheels magazine needs pictures for a colour spread, and the cars get their first shower. some point on every journey to the inland, you cross the border dividing the outback from the rest of Australia. For us, this was that place, for Paratilna marked the start of glorious bitumen, of towns like charming Corn with its fine old stone buildings, converted from old mills in some cases to museums and restaurants, and of ruins, of homesteads built in country that proved too fierce for the pioneer settlers. A night's motoring took us from South Australia into the alpine country of Victoria.
South Gippsland.
Here we could match the cars on exciting corners, stand back and watch to see how they cope. Same speed, same driver. One week's motoring, 7,500 kilometres over a wide variety of conditions. Okay, now it's time to draw conclusions, to stick our necks out. How did the cars compare? Both cars are good in terms of oil. There are no oil leaks on the outside, and except for the bits of dust, they're pretty clean, which is remarkable. The Sigma seems to have hit a bit more down low. The sump guard, which was fitted as fairly mangled, has done its job well, but it certainly has a different shape to when we started. The Camira, on the other hand, has more of an airfoil, you know, that dam that hangs beneath the nose of the car. It's to give it an aerodynamic shape, and it's great on the highway. But it has helped to shovel a bit of dirt up front. This part here, I mean. Yesterday I hit a very large patch of dust, and it shoveled it right up through there and laid it on top of the engine. It's blown away, but if you're driving one of these in very deep dust, just be a bit wary about that. It can act like a scoop. How are they for boot size? Well, the Sigma holds a lot, as you can see. But the Camira's boot is cavernous. It's much bigger. On the Sigma, a rear door dropped on its hinges and chafed the sealing rubber. Several things shook loose, including a rear radio speaker, but dust sealing was good, whereas the Camira showed smudges of dust. It dislodged one door handle, and it shook loose a needle on the instrument panel. The Camira did better on fuel consumption by about 3 miles to the gallon. They would both do better, however, under easier driving conditions.
The instruments are easy to read. Visibility in both cars is very good. Driving position is comfortable.
Both cars impressed with their strength and reliability. Opinions were mixed, however, on the rough road ride. Some preferred the Camira, but the majority favoured the Sigma. So now it's time for the team to vote.
I think I'd have to go for the Camira, Evan. For city-based people, the Camira would be the better car.
Bob Murray?
It goes beauty. It's very easy to drive and light, and it's a delightful car, and I'd have it every time.
Noel Tuckey?
Right. I think I'd pick the Sigma, Peter, over the two. Mainly because I think the Sigma has more in reserve as far as durability goes. It's built to last a longer period.
Peter Robinson.
That's the voice of practicality. I enjoyed driving the Camira. It is fun to drive. It's a car that could be used for shopping around any of the capital cities, and yet you could jump in the car and spin it off down to Melbourne or up to Brisbane at the weekend and have a thoroughly enjoyable, practical time in it. It wouldn't use very much petrol. It handles better than the Sigma does on bitumen roads.
Now, as in every contest, you may disagree with the judge's opinion. You've certainly seen enough of the fight to be able to draw your own conclusions. But a couple of things need to be said. One is that the test underlined the point that cars developed for Australian conditions are better in the outback on rough roads than imported cars. So if you want a car for rough running, choose one that is developed for the roads of Australia. And another is that we all developed a great deal of affection for the Sigma. It impressed us as a very honest car. But the winner, by that margin, is the Holden Camira.